At the beginning of the drama, we meet our female lead, Nyan. One day, Nyan's boss sends her to check on a patient at a specific address. Sounds simple enough. Except there's one small problem. Nyan can't find the house anywhere. Instead of the patient's home, she somehow ends up at the residence of Mr. Han, where she's supposed to check on his son. Mr. Han tells her calmly, "Someone will come to get you." And right on cue, a man arrives looking for someone. Nyan steps forward and says, "I'm the one who came to see the patient." Turns out, the man is actually the housekeeper. He escorts Nyan inside the house and leaves her in a room with a boy. And that boy is the male lead of our story. His name is Han Lee. Meanwhile, the housekeeper goes to Lee's mother, Mistress Han, and informs her, "Dr. Shin is with Lee. Don't worry, she's a psychologist. She'll help him." Mistress Han sighs and replies, "I hope so. This time everything needs to get better. I can't keep my son locked inside this house forever." Back in the room, Nyan starts trying to interact with Lee and begins what she thinks is the treatment process. But Lee clearly isn't interested. Every time she tries to come closer, he stops her immediately. Meanwhile, the real doctor is supposed to arrive soon. Mistress Han suddenly realizes something's wrong. She has accidentally left a complete stranger alone with her son. At the same time, Nyan is still trying to approach Lee and talk to him. But suddenly, her foot slips and she falls straight on top of him. And yes, you guessed it. They accidentally kiss. Right at that exact moment, Mistress Han walks in with the real Dr. Shin. Lee immediately pushes Nyan away in shock. During the commotion, Lee's hand gets injured. Mistress Han quickly applies medicine to his hand. At that same moment, Nyan receives a phone call from her boss. Her boss asks angrily, "Why haven't you reached the patient's house yet?" And before Nyan can even properly explain, she gets fired. Just like that. Afterward, Dr. Shin pulls Mistress Han aside for a private conversation. Mistress Han asks nervously, "Will my son ever recover?" Dr. Shin replies, "Ever since the day your son encountered that woman, he has suffered from a severe skin allergy problem." But then, she points toward Nyan. "When this girl kissed him, nothing happened." Dr. Shin continues, "This girl might actually be the key to helping your son recover." So, Mistress Han approaches Nyan with a proposal and asks her to sign an agreement. Mistress Han says to her, "I've looked into your situation. Your mother is sick, isn't she?" Nyan immediately becomes defensive and says, "Whatever you want to do, deal with me. Don't involve my mother." Mistress Han calmly replies, "You're misunderstanding me. I want to make a deal. I'll pay for your mother's treatment. In return, you help with my son's therapy." Nguyen looks stunned. "Wait. Are you serious?" Mistress Han nods. "Yes, and you can even continue your studies alongside my son." For Nyan, this deal sounds almost too good to be true. After thinking about it, she agrees. Later, Mistress Han tells Lee about the arrangement. But Lee immediately rejects it. "I'm not accepting this." Mistress Han then plays the classic emotional blackmail card. Only mothers truly master. And eventually, Lee reluctantly agrees. Mistress Han then gives both of them smartwatches. She explains, "These watches track the distance between you two. Every day for 8 hours, you must stay within 1 meter of each other." In the next scene, Nyan is carefully checking the distance on the watch. Lee immediately tells her, "Stay away from me." Nguyen apologizes, but Lee simply walks away. Nguyen calls after him, "Look, I know you don't like this, but I promised your mom I'd help with your treatment." Lee replies coldly, "If you really feel sorry, then resign." Nguyen shakes her head. "I can't do that," so Lee walks away again. Afterward, the housekeeper shows Nguyen her bedroom. He hands her a stack of files and says, "These contain all the information about Lee. Memorize everything." He also hands her a school uniform and adds, "Starting today, you'll be attending school with him." In the next scene, Nyan arrives at school with Lee. Lee steps out of the car first. Right behind him, Nyan gets out too, and accidentally bumps into him. Lee immediately says, "Stay away from me." Then he walks off. Nguyen follows him and says, "If I stay too far away, how am I supposed to keep the distance requirement?" She enters the classroom right behind him. Inside, the students begin whispering, "We've never seen her before." Nguyen casually sits in the empty seat next to Lee. A boy nearby quickly signals her not to sit there. At that moment, Lee, who had been sleeping, suddenly wakes up. Nguyen says confidently, "Don't look at me like that. The seat next to you is empty, so I sat here." Lee says nothing. Nguyen then turns to the boy and asks, "What's your problem?" Before he can answer, Lee interrupts and tells Nyan to stay quiet. The boy then takes Nyan aside and says, "Didn't you recognize me? I'm Shin Chin-Yuen. We worked part-time together at the bakery before." Nyan suddenly remembers him. Chin asks, "How's your mother doing?" Nyan sighs and replies, "Still the same." We still haven't found a kidney donor. Meanwhile, Lee walks by and overhears their conversation. Nian then tells Chin, I recently got a job with the Han family. Chin warns her, Lee doesn't seem normal. If you touch him, he can become violent. But Nian calmly replies, I don't think Lee is like that. Lee silently walks away. Later that night, while Lee is sleeping, Nian quietly enters his room. She connects her smartwatch to his. Then she whispers softly, honestly, I don't like staying near you either. As soon as 1 minute passes, I'm leaving. 1 minute passes. Nian leaves the room. But the moment she walks out, Lee opens his eyes. He had been pretending to sleep the entire time. The next morning, Nian arrives at school again with Lee. She tells him, you want me to stay away from you, right? Then give me your watch. I won't come near you again. Lee replies, fine, but don't make me angry for the entire day. If you manage that, I'll think about giving you my watch. Nguyen leaves him alone in the classroom and goes outside. She starts reading through Lee's information files. Meanwhile, a girl approaches her. Her name is Mulin Wu. Mulin Wu tells Nian, stop trying to impress Lee. Nian replies calmly, you've got the wrong idea. But Mushin notices the files in Nguyen's hands. Her expression instantly changes. Don't lie. You're clearly after Lee. Lee is mine. And with that dramatic declaration, she walks away. Later, Nian returns to the classroom. Muin Wu is sitting in her seat. Nguyen turns to Lee and casually asks, is Mukin Wu your girlfriend? Instead of answering, Lee simply hands Nian his watch. Nian takes the watch and leaves. Then Lee turns toward Musin Wu and asks, did you bother Nian? Muin immediately lies. No, I didn't do anything. Lee responds firmly, stay away from Nian. And for the record, you are not my girlfriend. Then Lee walks away. Meanwhile, Nian is visiting Chin at the bakery. She asks him, is Mukin Wu Lee's girlfriend? Chin laughs and says, no, she's not his girlfriend, but she's had a crush on him for the past 2 years. Lee happens to see Nian and Chin talking together and, surprisingly, starts feeling jealous. That night, Nian angrily writes in her notes about Lee, may he have terrible dreams tonight and not be able to sleep. Meanwhile, Lee actually has a nightmare and wakes up frightened. The next morning, Mistress Han asks her son, didn't you sleep well? Lee replies, I had a nightmare. Nian overhears this and suddenly feels guilty. She starts wondering if it somehow happened because of what she wrote. Later at school, Nian tells Chin, last night I wrote in my notes that Lee would have bad dreams. And it actually happened. Chin laughs and says, you're overthinking it. Things don't work like that. Just then, Lee arrives and asks Nian for his watch. But Nian refuses to return it. Lee calmly says, fine then, I'll consider this your resignation. Hearing that, Nian quickly gives the watch back. Lee says, if you want to keep the job, maintain the distance. That night again, Lee hands Nian several books and says, midterm exams are coming. You need to pass. If you fail, you won't be allowed to stay in my class. So, Nian studies late into the night in her room. While studying, she writes something in her diary. May Lee get 0 marks in the exam. Meanwhile, Lee remembers a childhood incident. When he was younger, he had once been kidnapped and locked inside a room by a mysterious woman. Just then, Mistress Han enters and asks, are you okay? Lee replies, yes, I'm fine. And then he leaves. The next day, Nian is extremely tired after studying all night. At school, she accidentally falls asleep while leaning on Lee's back. Lee says, wake up. But Nian mumbles sleepily, just let me rest for a minute. At that exact moment, Muin Wu sees them together and immediately gets angry. Later, when Muin finds Nian alone, she pulls her away. Nguyen is still half asleep. Muin demands, what kind of magic did you use on Lee? Why does he let you stay close to him? Nian replies honestly, Lee is sick. But hearing that only makes Muin more furious. She locks Nian inside a room. Then another girl calls Muin to come with her. So Muin leaves, and Nian remains locked inside. Meanwhile, the exam is about to start. Lee notices Nian is missing. He turns to Chin and says, Nian is missing. Chin runs into Jean and immediately asks, where's Nan? Jean shrugs and says, I don't know. Chin looks worried and replies, Nan is missing. After a moment, Jean finally says, maybe she's in the music room. Chin quickly informs Lee about it. Lee rushes over, has the room unlocked, and finds Nan trapped inside. He rescues her. A doctor checks Nan and calmly says, she's fine, she was just sleeping. Nan slowly wakes up and immediately asks, what time is it? If we miss the exam, we'll get a 0. Chin sighs and tells her, yeah, we already missed the exam. Just then, Jean walks in and apologizes to Nan, but Nan immediately says, Jean was the one who locked me in that room. Jean responds bluntly, I was really angry with you, so I locked you in. She then awkwardly adds, Later, I meant to let you out. But I forgot. Nen stares at her and asks, what did I ever do to you? Jean turns toward Lee and says, Nen told me that you're sick. Lee answers calmly, yes, I'm sick, but why does that matter to you? Jean tries to touch Lee, but Nen quickly pulls her away from him. Jean leaves the room looking sad, and Chin follows her. Meanwhile, Nen starts applying medicine to Lee's allergy. Lee asks curiously, where did you get that medicine? Nen replies, I always keep it with me. I asked the housekeeper for it so I can use it whenever needed. In the next scene, Nen is studying when Mistress Han walks in. Mistress Han tells her, my husband will be happy to meet you. He'll be coming home soon. Later, Lee and Nen arrive at school where students are checking their exam results. Jean ends up coming first in the exam, but instead of celebrating, she angrily walks away. Other girls whisper to each other, Lee didn't take the exam because of Nen. If he had taken it, Jean wouldn't have come first. Lee receives a 0. Nen looks guilty and says softly, I'm sorry. Lee simply replies. Meanwhile, the teacher scolds all 3 of them. The teacher asks Lee, why did you miss the exam? Nen steps forward and explains, I was locked in a room. They both missed the exam because they were saving me. The teacher raises an eyebrow and asks, can you prove that? Just then, Jean surprisingly steps forward and says, yes, it's true. Nen was locked in the room. With the help of the watchman, they opened the door and rescued her. So the teacher decides to give all 3 of them another chance to take the exam. In the next scene, Nen asks Chin, why isn't Lee studying? Chin casually replies, he doesn't need to study. Then Chin walks away. Nen turns to Lee and asks, can you give me your notes? Lee highlights a section in her book and says, just read this part, you'll pass. Nen asks, how are you so sure? Lee replies confidently, because I have brains. Later that night, Nen goes to Lee and asks, can you help me with the other subjects too? Lee hands her all the exam papers. Nen asks carefully, can I share these papers with Chin? Lee shrugs and replies, you can do whatever you want. The next day, Nen tells Lee, I don't understand this question. Lee comes closer and explains it to her. Nen tries to touch Lee's watch, but he immediately stops her. When Nen notices Chin approaching, she quickly walks over to him. She gives him the exam papers and says, Lee gave these to me. Then Nen asks Chin, how can I touch Lee without irritating him? Chin raises an eyebrow and asks, why do you want to touch him? Do you like him? Nen quickly replies, just give me an idea. Or don't. Chin smirks and says, touch him while he's sleeping. Nen goes back, but Lee isn't there. Meanwhile, Lee's father, Mr. Han, finally arrives home. Mistress Han tells her husband all about Nen. She even says, I want Nen to become our daughter-in-law. But Mr. Han immediately shuts that down. Lee will marry only the daughter of the Zhang family. Meanwhile, Chin gives Nen another idea. Hide a piece of paper in your hand and touch Lee's head. If he notices, just say there was a paper stuck in his hair. Chin even tells Nen to practice the move with him. Unfortunately, Lee walks by and sees them together. And yes, he gets jealous. He immediately walks away. Meanwhile, Nen remembers that Mistress Han had said, Mr. Han is a very strict man. Mistress Han tells her husband that Lee has changed a lot since Nen arrived. She says it all happened because of Nen. Lee overhears this conversation. The next day, Nen, Lee, and Jean sit down to take the exam. When Nen looks at the exam paper, she thinks, this is exactly the same paper Lee gave me. Meanwhile, Chin tells Jean everything about the exam paper. Jean secretly takes a copy of the paper from Chin and gives it to the teacher. The teacher becomes furious with Lee and rejects his exam. Lee walks out of the teacher's office. Nen looks at him and says softly, I'm sorry. Later, Mistress Han gives Nen a tablet as a gift for passing the exam. When Nen turns it on, she notices something surprising. The profile picture on the tablet is a photo of her and Lee together. The next day, Nen follows Lee around. She thinks to herself, I don't want to disappoint Mistress Han. Nen tries to touch Lee, but Lee quickly says, keep your hands away from me. Did my mother pressure you again to complete another task? Nen replies honestly, I just don't want to disappoint her. In the classroom, Lee is sleeping. Nen thinks, why does he never sleep at night? Suddenly, Lee receives a phone call and leaves the room. Nen quietly follows him. Meanwhile, Chin finds Nen's step diary. Inside it is a photo of Nen and Lee. Other girls see it too and start whispering, are they dating? Chin gets angry as well. Soon the whole school starts gossiping about Nen. Chin apologizes to Nyan and says, forgive me, this happened because of me. Nen replies, it's okay, I'm just worried about Lee's anger. I don't know what he'll do. Meanwhile, Lee notices Nen isn't in class and goes looking for her. He finds Nen talking on the phone with Mistress Han. Mistress Han tells Nen, your mother's transplant will happen next week. Nen becomes extremely happy and says, I finally completed the 1-minute task. Lee overhears this conversation and quietly walks away. Back in the classroom, the girls continue gossiping about Nen and Lee. Jean gets angry and says they can never be together. Just then, Lee walks in. The entire room suddenly goes silent. Lee looks at Jean and says, "You're right, I will never date Nen." At that exact moment, Nen walks in and hears everything. In the next scene, Nen accidentally bumps into Lee. She says awkwardly, "When Mistress Han gave me that tablet, it already had our photo in it. If it bothers you, I can change it." Lee replies coldly, "You only work for our family. Why would any of this matter to me?" The next day at school, Chin asks Nen, "Are you okay?" Nen answers, "Yes, I'm fine." Then Nen suddenly asks him, "You love Jean, don't you?" Chin looks shocked. "How did you know?" Nen smiles and says, "I could tell from the way you act." Later, while Nen is sitting alone, Jean walks up to her. Jean says smugly, "Today I'm going on a date with Lee." Nen immediately follows Jean to stop her. Jean tries to touch Lee while handing him coffee, but Nen jumps in and stops her. Because of this, the coffee spills onto Nen's hand and burns it. Lee immediately takes Nen to the classroom and applies medicine to her hand. Nen softly asks him, "Are you not angry with me?" Lee replies, "Why would I be angry with you?" At that moment, they both realize the entire class is staring at them. So they quickly move away from each other. Later, we see Lee holding Nen's hand. He says, "The 1 minute is over." Nen replies quietly, "Stay like this for a little longer." But Lee pulls his hand away. Nyan loses balance and falls right on top of him. And right at that moment, Mistress Han walks in. Nen quickly jumps up. As Lee leaves, he signals something to his mother. Mistress Han smiles and tells Nen, "Your 1 minute task has now become 10 minutes. The next day, Nyan thinks to herself, "How am I supposed to stay close to Lee for 10 minutes? Then she sees a poster for a dance competition. Nen immediately tells Lee, "We should perform together." But Lee refuses. Meanwhile, Lee asks Chin, "You're the male lead in the performance, right?" Chin replies, "Yes." Nen is making the props, so I'm helping her. Lee asks, "So Nen isn't playing Cinderella?" Chin answers, "No, Cinderella will be Jean." But later, Lee himself goes to help Nen. While they are working, his hand accidentally touches Nen's hand. When Jean hears that Lee went to help Nen, she becomes furious and rushes over. At that exact moment, Nen slips and almost falls, but Lee quickly catches her. Then he playfully puts a little paint on Nen's nose. They both start laughing. Just then Jean arrives. In anger, she tries to grab Nen. Lee steps in to defend Nen, and Jean ends up falling down and injuring her leg. Because of that injury, Jean can no longer perform. So, Chin convinces Nen to take the role of Cinderella instead. Chin starts teaching Nen how to dance. But unfortunately, Nen is terrible at dancing. Lee sees them practicing closely together and feels jealous. He walks away. That night, Lee finds Nen practicing the dance alone. And finally, he decides to teach her himself. When Nen struggles with the dance steps, Lee calmly tells her, "Put your feet on mine, I'll do the steps. You just remember them." So Nen places her feet on his, and they begin practicing together like that. It's awkward at first, but slowly the rhythm starts working. Meanwhile, Mistress Han happens to see them practicing. Instead of interrupting, she quietly pulls out her phone and secretly snaps a few photos, clearly enjoying the moment. The next morning, Nen thanks Lee and asks him, "Will you come watch my performance?" Lee immediately refuses. Meanwhile, following Jean's orders, another girl secretly cuts Jean's costume. At the performance, Lee arrives wearing a mask so no one recognizes him. On stage, Nen stands alone, looking nervous while the audience begins mocking her. But suddenly, Lee steps onto the stage. He joins her and starts dancing with her, turning what could have been a disaster into a surprisingly beautiful performance. Elsewhere, Chin tells Jean that Lee helped Nen. This only makes Jean even more jealous. Later in the story, Lee finds Nen's diary and quietly keeps it with him. On the other side, Jean meets Chin and tells him honestly, "I love Lee very much, but I want to forget him." She continues, "I know you love me, but I'm not ready yet. Will you wait for me?" Chin looks shocked for a moment, but then gently replies, "Yes, I'll wait for you." Meanwhile, Mistress Han tells Nen and Lee, "I saw your dance. You both looked wonderful." Then she looks at Lee and says, "Lee, you wanted to help Nen. That shows how much you care about her." Lee immediately denies it. "I only did it for the drama club." Then he walks away. Nen turns to Mistress Han and says, "You're misunderstanding things. There's nothing between us. I'm only doing my job." After saying that, Nen also walks away. Later, Lee sits alone and reads Nen's diary, where she has written all her personal wishes. Meanwhile, Nen tells someone, "Lee is engaged to Miss Jiang. When he gets better, I'll have to leave. Our worlds are completely different." Just then, Nen receives a call from Chin. She goes to his bakery to help him. Nen looks at Chin suspiciously and asks, "You're hiding something, aren't you?" Chin quickly denies it. But Nen keeps insisting. Outside the bakery, Lee happens to see Nen and Chin together. And yes, he immediately gets jealous. The housekeeper asks Lee politely, "Should we leave?" But Lee replies, "No, I suddenly feel like eating something sweet." Inside the bakery, Chin finally tells Nen, "Jean said she'll give me a chance." Nen smiles happily and says, "That means she's already halfway there." Then Chin asks her, "What about you and Lee?" Right at that moment, Lee walks in, and he's holding Nen's diary. In the next scene, Nen asks Lee to give her diary back. But Lee casually says that he wants cupcakes. And if the cupcakes aren't tasty, he's going to read her diary out loud. Meanwhile, the housekeeper calls Mistress Han and informs her that their plan worked perfectly. Mistress Han smiles and says she already knew her son had a crush on Nen. The only problem is, Lee himself hasn't realized it yet. Later, Nen brings the cupcakes, but she doesn't see Lee anywhere. Suddenly, Lee appears behind her, and Nen accidentally bumps into him. Their faces are suddenly very close. Lee's heartbeat starts racing, and Nen can feel it too. Lee apologizes and admits that he already read her diary. Then he asks Nen a surprising question. "Would you like to go camping with me?" Nen agrees. While they're traveling, Nen suddenly starts feeling pain in her stomach. So Lee books a hotel room and decides they should stay there for the night. Nen looks confused and asks why he's staying in the same room instead of going to his own. Lee explains that only one room was available. So, unfortunately, they have to share it. Nen says she'll sleep on the sofa while Lee can take the bed. But the sofa turns out to be extremely uncomfortable. Lee eventually tells her to come sleep on the bed because he's trying to sleep and she's making too much noise. Nen finally agrees and lies down beside him. Later that night, Nen wakes up and goes to the washroom. When she returns, she accidentally hugs Lee while sleeping. Lee's heartbeat starts racing again. While sleeping, Lee has another dream. In the dream, he sees himself being kidnapped as a child. But suddenly, a little girl appears. Lee wakes up and sees Nen lying beside him. Nen also wakes up quickly, moves away, and awkwardly says she needs to go to the washroom again. After that, Lee secretly sends a message to someone asking them to continue searching for that mysterious girl. Soon, both of them arrive at the camping site and start setting up a tent. While unpacking, Nen suddenly realizes something embarrassing. She only packed one mattress. She thinks nervously, "Does this mean we have to sleep together again?" Nen apologizes and tells Lee it was her mistake, but promises she won't cross any boundaries. Lee smirks slightly and replies, "We'll see how well you keep that promise." Later, Lee and Nen go to the beach and enjoy themselves. They walk around, laugh, and even take photos together. But suddenly, Nen notices someone going into the water. It's Jiwee. Nen rushes toward the water to help her. But in the process, Jiwee suddenly falls into the water. Nen quickly apologizes, thinking Jiwee had gone into the water because she wanted to harm herself. But Jiwee laughs it off and explains she simply wanted to enjoy the water. Now her clothes are soaked because of Nen's dramatic rescue attempt. Nen offers to lend her some clothes, but Jiwee politely refuses. Instead, Nen sends a message to Chin asking him to come over. Soon, Chin and Lee arrive, and the four of them spend some relaxed time together. Later, Jiwee suddenly gets stomach pain and decides to leave. Privately, Chin asks Nien to give sanitary pads to Jiwee. Nen looks surprised and asks how he knew she might need them. Chin casually explains that he had already packed some in the bag earlier, just in case. Nen nods and goes after Jiwee. Meanwhile, Lee asks Chin an unexpected question. "Do you like Jiwee?" Chin raises an eyebrow and asks if Lee has a problem with that. Lee replies honestly that he's just curious because he wants to learn how someone takes care of the person they love. Chin smiles and says, "When you truly love someone, you don't need lessons. You naturally start caring for them." On the other side, Nen tells Jiwee that Chin really cares about her and takes great care of her. Jiwee admits she knows that, but says she can't control her feelings because she used to be in love with Lee. Nen then asks Jiwee how she feels about Chin now. Jiwee smiles slightly and says she actually finds him pretty cute. She also apologizes to Nen, and Nen tells her to forget about the past. In the next scene, Nen casually tells Lee that Chin is actually a really nice guy. Lee suddenly asks Nen a very personal question about her period. Nen immediately covers his mouth with her hand to stop him from finishing the sentence. The next morning, Chin asks everyone what their plan is for the day. Nen shrugs and says they didn't really come with a plan. Chin suggests a fun idea. Everyone writes an activity on a note, and whatever note they pick is what they'll do. Lee randomly picks one. It says, amusement park. So the group heads to the amusement park and spends the day enjoying themselves. Later, we see Lee saying goodbye to Jiwee with a handshake. Jiwee looks surprised. Lee calmly explains that he has now recovered. Jiwee shakes his hand. Nen and Chin secretly watch the moment from a distance. Nen realizes that since Lee has recovered, it might be time for her to leave. Meanwhile, we are introduced to another important character in the story. Jang Makai. She is the daughter of the Jang family, the same woman who is supposed to marry Lee. Makui arrives at Lee's house with her father and meets Lee's parents. At the same time, Lee tells Nen that his birthday is coming soon and that he will be going on a short trip. He explains that he needs to find someone very important. Nen misunderstands and assumes he means Miss Jang. Lee tells Nen to take care of herself while he's away. On the other side, Jiwee finally proposes to Chin, and Chin happily accepts. Later, Nen returns home with Lee, but by the time they arrive, Makui has already left. Nen tells Lee that he has fully recovered now. Mistress Han happily hugs Lee, and Lee hugs his mother back. Later, Lee casually asks the housekeeper what kind of birthday gift he should buy. Nen overhears the conversation and begins thinking about what she should give Lee as a birthday present. She calls Chin and asks what boys like as birthday gifts. Chin laughs and replies that whatever a girl gives, boys will like it. Meanwhile, Lee bumps into Makui on his way home, but he doesn't recognize her. He simply tells her that if she's there to see his parents, they're inside. Then he walks away. Makui enters the house and meets Mr. Han. She tells him she just met Lee outside, but it seemed like he didn't recognize her. Mr. Han explains that Lee was probably just in a hurry. Later, Lee meets Chin and asks him how he should confess his feelings to Nen. Chin happily starts giving him advice. In the next scene, Nen bakes a cake for Lee's birthday. She asks Jiwee if Lee will like it. Right then, Chin walks in and confidently says, Lee will definitely love it. Then Chin secretly signals Jiwee, and the two quietly leave. Jiwee tells Nen she should wear a red dress to the birthday party because red is Lee's favorite color. Nen agrees but wonders where she'll even find a red dress. Just then, Mistress Han walks into her room with perfect timing. She hands Nen a beautiful red dress and says she saw it earlier and thought Nen would look nice in it. Nen puts on the red dress and prepares for the birthday party. At the party, Lee is just about to confess his feelings to Nen. Meanwhile, Jiwee tells Chin that she cannot find Nen anywhere. Suddenly, Mr. Han interrupts Lee before he can say anything. Instead, he announces to everyone that Lee's marriage with Makui will happen soon. Makui walks over and stands beside Lee. Lee looks at his father in complete shock. The story shifts to a flashback. Earlier, Mr. Han had already told Nen that during the birthday party he would announce Lee and Makui's marriage. That meant Nen's job was finished. There was no reason for her to stay anymore. Returning to the present moment, Makui tries to hold Lee's hand, but Lee pulls his hand away and walks off. Mr. Jang angrily asks Mr. Han what is going on. He questions whether Lee is not ready for the marriage and asks why they were invited if Lee wasn't prepared. Mr. Han promises to talk to his son. Meanwhile, Nen quietly leaves the house. She leaves the red dress and her watch in the room and disappears without saying goodbye. Later, Lee comes to the room and realizes Nen has already left. On the other side, Makui learns about Nen. Lee searches for Nen at the hospital but cannot find her. He tells Chin and Jiwee that because of his father, Nen left him. Now even her phone is turned off. Chin tells Lee that they must find her together. Just then, Makui arrives and calls Lee's name. But Lee ignores her and walks away. Later, Chin tells Lee they finally found Nen's home address. Lee immediately goes there. Nen opens the door and asks why he came. Just then, Nen's mother, Mistress Sin, comes outside and asks who he is. Lee politely says that Nen used to work at their house. Mistress Sin thanks Lee's mother for helping them so much. Lee lies and says his car broke down and asks if he can stay for a while. Mistress Sin agrees. She sends Nen to the market to buy groceries. Lee decides to go with her. While returning from the market, Lee notices a building. It's the same building where he was kidnapped as a child. Lee slowly walks inside. Nen follows him. Suddenly, Lee looks at Nen and says he finally remembers. She was the girl who saved him. Nen asks if he was the little boy she helped escape when they were children. Lee nods and says he has been searching for her ever since. Nen explains that after helping him escape, she went to fetch water for him. But when she came back, he had already disappeared. Lee admits he was too scared at the time, so he ran back home. After that, he started having severe skin allergies whenever someone touched him. Nen asks Lee if the important person he was searching for all this time was her. Lee smiles and says yes. Meanwhile, Makui arrives at Lee's house and waits for him. The housekeeper tries to send her away, saying he doesn't know when Lee will return. But Makui insists she'll wait. Mistress Han purposely shows Makui photos of Lee and Nen together, making her jealous. Later, Nen returns home with Lee. She excitedly tells her mother that the boy she once saved from being locked up was actually Lee. Mistress Sin is shocked. Lee then asks Mistress Sin if she knew the woman who kidnapped him. Mistress Sin explains that she did know her. The woman used to work with her at the factory. But the factory fired her and refused to pay her. Because of that, she fell into depression and kidnapped a child hoping to get money. Lee then learns something shocking. The factory belonged to the Jang family. Later, Lee returns home. Makui tells him she has been waiting for a long time. Lee simply tells her to go home. Makui angrily asks why he is treating her this way since they are engaged. Lee calmly replies that he is breaking the engagement. Makui warns him that he will regret this decision. Then she leaves. Lee tells his father that he will marry the girl he truly loves. Mr. Han argues that he has a long friendship with Mr. Jang, and that this marriage would benefit both families. Lee responds that this is his father's problem. He also reveals that he has discovered illegal activities happening in Mr. Jang's factory. If those crimes are proven, that entire family could be destroyed. Mr. Han looks serious and tells Lee that if he can prove those accusations, he will personally break the engagement. Meanwhile, Makui's assistant reports new information. Nen had worked at the Han house, but no one knows exactly what she was doing there. Mistress Han liked Nen very much, and even arranged treatment for Nen's mother. Nen seems to be very special to Lee. Makui asks her assistant if there is anything else. The assistant says they found Nen's old address. Makui immediately says, "Take me there." Meanwhile, Lee meets Mistress Sin again and asks about the other workers from that factory. Mistress Sin begins telling him about them. Now Lee and Nen start investigating the shady activities of the factory together. After digging through records and documents, Lee finally discovers solid proof against Mr. Jang. In the next scene, Nen is walking alone when she suddenly realizes someone is following her. Her instincts kick in immediately. Nen quickly turns around and attacks the person, but it turns out to be Lee. Nen sighs and says, "You scared me." Lee tells her excitedly, "I found the factory's account book. It proves that Mr. Jang committed financial fraud." Nen becomes happy hearing this news. She tells Lee, "You should show this account book to your father." Lee nods and says, "I will. But first I'll drop you home." Nen replies that she can go by herself. Lee leaves. But a little later, as Nen continues walking, she suddenly turns around and sees Makui approaching with her assistant. Nen asks, "Who are you?" Makui calmly replies, "You don't know me. But I know you." Nen asks her, "What do you want?" At that exact moment, Lee returns and asks Makui, "What are you doing here?" Makui turns toward Lee and begins confronting him. "Lee, what are you doing? Since childhood we were engaged. You treated me terribly. You left me alone at the party. You let your mother insult me, and now you betrayed me for that girl." Lee calmly responds, "I already made it clear before. Our engagement is over." Makui asks angrily, "You're leaving me for her?" Lee replies firmly, "No matter what happens, I will choose Nen." Makui asks, "You're really going against our families for her?" Lee says, "Maybe you don't know what your family has done." Later, Lee shows his father the proof and explains everything about the illegal activities happening inside Mr. Jang's factory. He tells his father that Mr. Jang committed fraud with the workers' salaries and never paid them. One of those workers became depressed and mentally unstable, and that same woman eventually kidnapped him. Mistress Han asks Lee, "How did you meet the kidnapper?" Lee explains that he was kidnapped there, and that Nen was the one who helped him escape. Mistress Han turns to Nen emotionally and says, "You saved my son's life twice. Thank you." Makui immediately shouts, "This is all a lie. Nen made this whole story." Lee tells his father, "Everything is proven in front of you. Now, break the engagement." Mistress Han supports him and says to her husband, "Break the engagement. I never liked the Zhang family anyway." Mr. Han finally announces, "I am breaking the engagement." At that moment, Mr. Jang arrives and angrily asks what is going on. Makui runs to him and says, "They are all bullying me." Lee calmly asks Mr. Jang, "Do you remember this account book?" Mr. Jang pretends he doesn't know anything about it. Lee replies, "If we don't remember, we can discuss it in court." Mr. Jang turns to Mr. Han and says, "Look how your son is speaking to me." But Mr. Han surprisingly replies, "My son is absolutely right. You should be punished for what you did." Mr. Jang reminds him about their long friendship and says he should support him. Makui then turns to her father and says, "If you did nothing wrong, why are you begging him?" Makui storms away. Mr. Jiang follows her. After everything settles down, Mr. Han apologizes to Nen. Nen politely says, "You don't need to apologize to me. I only feel bad for those workers who never received their salaries." Mr. Han turns to Lee and says, "Nen is a good girl. You chose the right person." Lee smiles and replies, "I know." Nen starts leaving, but Lee suddenly stops her. He says dramatically, "I became sick again because Makui scared me. You need to stay with me until I recover." Mr. and Mistress Han also insist that Nen stay, so she finally agrees. In the next scene, Mistress Han spends time happily with Nen. Meanwhile, Lee is talking with his father. Mr. Han complains jokingly, "Since Nen came into your mother's life, she has forgotten about me." Lee laughs and replies, "When Nen is with Mom, she forgets about me too." Mr. Han sighs and says, "I miss my wife." Lee says, "I miss Nen too." Mr. Han suddenly gets an idea. Lee goes to his mother and tells her that his father is sick and currently in the hospital. Mistress Han rushes out to see him. Nen says they should also go to the hospital, but Lee stops her and reveals, "That was our plan. We separated you two so they can spend time together. And we can spend time together, too." Nen smiles and says she will cook food for him. While they are eating together, Makui suddenly appears. Lee asks her, "What are you doing here?" Makui calmly says, "I came to say goodbye to both of you." Lee replies she doesn't need to say goodbye. Makui apologizes to Nen and says she is going abroad. Then she tells them both to stay happy and leaves. Nen asks Lee why she suddenly decided to go abroad. Lee explains that Mr. Zhang sold everything and returned the money to the workers. Later, Jean tells Nen that Chin has proposed to her for marriage. Nen congratulates her and says she is very lucky. Jean then asks Nen if Lee has proposed yet. Nen says not yet. He hasn't even confessed. Meanwhile, Lee is talking with Chin. Chin says happily, "The girl I loved for years, I'm finally going to marry her." Then he asks Lee what his plan is. Lee says casually that his mother is happy raising her daughter, and he is currently working as an intern in his father's company. Chin laughs and says, "That's not what I meant." Just then Jean calls Chin, and both Chin and Lee go to meet her. Nen purposely shows Lee a wedding dress, while Jean talks about wedding heels. But Lee still doesn't understand the hint. Nen gets frustrated and walks away. Jean sighs and tells Lee, "You're really slow." "That's why I chose Chin." Lee looks completely confused. He asks Chin what he did wrong, but Chin just leaves without explaining. Meanwhile, Jean tells Nen nothing can be done with Lee. Nen says she is starting to lose hope. But Jean encourages her and promises to help. Just then Lee arrives. Jean starts talking about how he should propose to Nen. Lee calmly replies, "I know, I'll do it in my own way." Later, everyone keeps dropping hints about marriage to Lee, but somehow he still doesn't catch on. Finally, everyone gathers together and complains. But Chin says, "We all gave him hints, but he didn't understand anything." Nen simply smiles and says, "It doesn't matter. I love Lee and Lee loves me. We're together. That's enough for me." Lee quietly overhears this, and finally, in the last scene of the drama, Lee surprises Nen. He kneels down and proposes to her. Nen happily accepts. Lee places the ring on her finger. Then they kiss. At that exact moment, all their friends and family walk in and cheer for them. Everyone congratulates the couple. And with that sweet moment, the story finally comes to an end. So guys, if you enjoyed this drama recap, don't forget to like the video, and for more stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.